In the game, I equipped my heavy crossbow, which was played on Domji. I played L.A. Agartha. E.A. Agartha was originally a nation of Pale Ones, strange one-eyed creatures that evolved underground. Ruled by a council of elders, they guarded the seal which must not be broken, which housed a legion of mad gods defeated by the first Pantocrator. The civilization grew strong, united under Ogon and the wise oracles, but was not especially warlike. The son of Ogon, whose name was purged by Agarthan records and has since been known only as Kinbreaker, led the Agarthans in an attempt to conquer the surface world. There, he encountered tactics like flanking and archery that didn't exist underground, and was soundly defeated. The humans then followed the Agarthans into their underground home, and the Agarthans, in desperation, broke the seal. The hordes of ghosts and undead titans defeated the humans, but also all but genocided the Agarthan race. After the Early Ages Ascension War ended, Ulm was overtaken by the Iron Inquisition, banning all the sorcerers from the land. One of these sorcerers, Klaus, who would come to be known as the Mason of the Underworld, wandered through various courts in the post-Ermor world and became a skilled diplomat. When he heard rumors of the opulent halls and magical riches of Agartha, he decided to make them his. Agartha was a broken nation, in need of guidance, and he felt that he could guide them. By gathering mages who had fled the Iron Inquisition, and with economic aid from the Emerald Emperor of Pythium, he organized the human conquest of the cavern realm of Agartha. He orchestrated the reforming of Agarthan society and created the Golem cult for his fugitive mages. He made himself a power behind the oracles and ruled the Golem crafters with Iron Hand and Silver Tongue. Unfortunately, the Agarthans once again tried to conquer the surface world and were once again defeated. The statues were smashed, and the remaining Agarthans were all but wiped out. Now only human remnants remain, and they have turned to necromancy as a way of life. Having lived underground for centuries, they have adopted to the ways underground, and while their eyesight is poor on the surface, they do have limited dark vision to enable them to fight both in the dark and underground much more effectively. Thonian necromancers reanimate mummified Agarthans, with the oracles, now known as Tomb Oracles, being the most powerful mage priests in the nation. Meanwhile, the human dead are animated to serve as laborers and expendable foot soldiers. Mechanically, the nation is a strong early and mid-game nation, thanks to their efficient mages, versatile alchemists, and most importantly, their steel crossbows. Dealing more damage than regular crossbows without the rate of fire malice of arbalists, they are able to easily match the firepower of any other nation, dealing damage even to heavily armored heavy infantry and cavalry. And they're able to use their mages to both provide additional damage and provide a replenishing frontline to wear the enemy down, even with relatively little research. Later, they transition naturally to deploying Tomb Oracles as supercasters and supercombatants, able to both buff themselves up to take down enemy armies, provided that they're properly equipped, and provide high-level battlefield magic like Darkness and Earthquake. However, they eventually fall behind the blood nations which are ubiquitous in LA, and need to be able to use their early game strength to either win the game outright early, or carve themselves out a massive advantage. If Agartha isn't by far in the lead by the end of year 3 or 4, they will most likely not be able to win. While individual battles can be won with attrition tactics, Agartha needs to be aggressive strategically in order to win the game. This is the pretender that I used in this game. The game I equipped my heavy crossbow was played with somewhat unusual settings, in that research was set to difficult, and resources were increased by 50%. This means that Agartha actually does have something of an advantage, in that because their magic is online earlier, they're able to basically keep that mid-game advantage for a bit longer, and because resources are increased, they're able to use their high-resource units more easily without needing Production 3 in order to amass their troops. As a result, I was able to take a very early-game oriented build, so I took Sloth 2, since I don't need the resources quite as much, and I was taking a very expensive Bless. So the N9 E9 Bless is mostly a Tomb Oracle Bless, in that it's going to allow them to reinvigorate themselves with the bonus reinvigoration from the Earth Bless, and it's going to enable them to regenerate naturally with the N Bless. While they're also able to regenerate more with items, this means that I can either save the nature gems, which are normally somewhat hard to come by for Agartha, or I can regenerate 20% of their health every round, instead of just 10%. The Astral 2 is actually one of the more important parts of the build, because that's going to enable my god to make Astral boosters. Agartha gets only up to Astral 1 natively, barring some extremely lucky randoms. So having a god capable of making boosters is important for allowing them to get all the way up to Astral 3, which unlocks magic phase movement and golem construction for magic phase moving thugs and super combatants. I didn't actually need Earth 9, as it turned out. The additional protection is nice, but 2 oracles are oftentimes heavily equipped enough that extra protection isn't necessary for keeping them alive. Blind Fighters, the Agarthan Sacred Troop, does benefit a lot from reinvigoration as well as the bonus HP and regeneration that they get from the N9 Bless. However, because they're already heavily armored and protection provides diminishing returns between natural protection and armor, the extra +5 protection is actually reduced to only +1 or +2 in practice, meaning that the Earth 8 Bless, which would have provided me a bunch more design points, would probably have been better, because with that and 1 lower Dominion, I could have either avoided these negative scales here entirely, or increased my production in order to have an even stronger early game. But this is what I ended up going with, and it ended up working out okay. As far as my scales go, the most important thing is taking these 2 income scales, order and growth, as high as I can get them. Order, in addition to improving income, also reduces unrest, and given that you're always going to have a bit of unrest when you conquer provinces, and especially along volatile borders where provinces change hands, the unrest reduction actually does help quite a bit in improving your income over time. Growth, meanwhile, is the best scale for improving your income over time because of the population growth that it provides, increasing your income over time. Misfortune isn't actually a skill that I like to take when I can avoid it, because it shifts luck events to both become worse, and makes the events that you get more likely to be bad. So the way that luck events work is that essentially you have a sliding scale from very good, the uncommonly good events, to very bad, the uncommonly bad events, and then luck provides a flat modifier which shifts everything down to be worse. So you don't just get worse events, you also get fewer of the good ones. Drain, meanwhile, is actually something that Agartha can get away with. Even though in difficult research games you actually oftentimes want to have magic because there's going to be more total research points required, Agartha, in their Alchemists, has a mage that has a very high base RP value, so that -1 RP per mage actually doesn't hurt them quite as much as it ordinarily would. And then, of course, this pretender is imprisoned, because I'm mostly taking him for the bless and the magic that he provides, and it's okay if the Astral Boosters don't come online until fairly late in the game, because I won't be able to take advantage of it until I have the research required. Meanwhile, the bless is very expensive, so I need all the design points that I can get, so it's worth taking it imprisoned for those extra 250. The 7 Dominion is helpful, both for spreading these scales, which, while they do have some downsides, are still generally good, and enabling me to recruit a large number of blind fighters. And given the map's extra resource settings, I can afford to recruit a fair few of them even with Sloth. As far as the temperature scales go, heat ended up being a mistake because it prevented me from crossing over rivers in my Dominion. And more importantly, Agartha in the late age doesn't have the cold-blooded units of EA and MA, but it does have units with cold auras, so they would have benefited quite a bit from that cold Dominion, making it more likely to freeze enemies when fighting in friendly Dominion. And I ended up fighting against some cold-blooded units who would have been hurt quite a bit by being forced to fight in the cold. But having the temperature scales at 3 didn't hurt me too badly economically, and in Heat 3, your flaming arrows are more likely to set enemies on fire, and your Fire Elemental's heat auras are going to also help do the same thing. So it's not a total waste, it's just not quite as good as it could have been with cold.
Santa Maria, strela Dia, mostra nos via, pera Deus nos guia.